Hi there. Hi, Dr. Lepora here. Here to talk today about compassion and really two different types of compassion. Because when I think about compassion, I think that there's an easy type of compassion, and then there's what I call a tested compassion, a more difficult compassion. I call it easy compassion because there's a certain level of compassion that comes easy for most of us. For example, we were to see a child steal bread out of a store because they were hungry. It's easy for us to have compassion for that child. Stealing is wrong, but it's easy for us to have compassion to understand how the child could be provoked to steal a piece of food, if they're hungry. And so that's that what I call easy compassion is that compassion. It's easy to understand how someone could be tempted to do what they do because perhaps if we were hungry, we might be tempted to steal a piece of bread if we hadn't eaten in a day. And that's that easy type of compassion, the compassion you could imagine yourself doing in that situation, even if maybe it was wrong. You could imagine forgiving yourself in that situation. But then there is a more what I call tested compassion. That's that more difficult compassion. So that goes into that bucket of things that, say, for example, you could not imagine yourself doing. So it's hard for you to have compassion, say, for example, for someone who's telling a lie if you're a very honest person. Or you might not have compassion for someone who, say, cheated on a test. If you studied and you worked hard for the B that you got, and this person cheated and they got caught, you might not have compassion for them. You might not understand how they would need or deserve compassion in that situation. And I would think the most tested form of compassion is when someone does something to you or they do not do something for you, in that sense of, if someone did not keep their word with you, or if someone, say, broke, a trusted, confidentiality or something of that nature. You might not have much compassion for that person because you might be angry at them. Now, there's two reasons why a lot of times we don't have compassion. One is a more obvious reason, and that reason is because we're focused on ourselves. You know, we're focused on ourselves in a sense of either A, being too hard on ourselves, not having compassion for ourselves, which self-compassion is just as easy, or we fail to have compassion toward others because we're focused on how we think it's wrong what they did, or the situation that they're in, or quite frankly, we're selfish. We don't care about the situation that they're in because we're focused on ourselves. So that's one reason why a lot of times we may lack compassion, because it's hard for us to focus on somebody else's needs because we have needs of our own. So that's the number one reason why we oftentimes lack compassion. Another time we lack compassion, which, believe it or not, most of us don't realize it when we're doing it, is out of fear. Sometimes we have fear, and that is why we're lacking compassion. So why would we have fear? To have compassion for multiple reasons. For one, we may have fear to be able to relate to someone in a situation. So, for example, earlier on, I mentioned the hungry child. Well, hopefully, we are giving individuals and we're going to give, but sometimes do we really want to think about something that is so painful as someone experiencing hunger? So, in those situations, we may lack sufficient compassion because we don't want to think about it. We're afraid to think about what another person may be carrying. Or someone makes a mistake, for example, and you don't really necessarily want to interact with that person because you're not sure what they might do to you. Out of fear, you choose to not have compassion for that person. It's much easier to say, well, they brought it on themselves, than to associate with that person. And it's much easier to not think about a negative experience they may be having by saying they brought it on themselves. Because believe it or not, compassion takes a weight of ourselves. It's a form of empathy. And so anytime we have empathy, we have a weight that we're carrying from someone else. It's very commonly felt for people who are, say, for example, intercessory prayers, people who pray for other people. It's easy to say you should give it to God, whether you're praying for someone else or praying for yourself. You should easily, obviously, give it to God because God is the one who has the power. But when you are empathic and you truly have empathy for others, it's hard for you to not carry some of the feeling weight of the other person. And so out of fear sometimes we refuse compassion. We deny it. We don't want it because we don't want to carry that weight. If I admit that that person has, say, for example, made a mistake, well, that's harder. Then I'm going to feel sorry for that person. Say, for example, in the example, someone failed a test, and because they were caught cheating, they got a 0 on the test. If that's a friend of yours in school or something like that, it's going to give you pain because you care about that person. But it's much easier to not care and say, well, they brought it on themselves, and refuse the compassion in that instance. In other situations, you may not want to give time to someone. And that's another reason why we don't want to have compassion. Well, I'm not going to give him or her a pep talk. He or she keeps doing the same thing. I keep telling them, stop doing it. Stop seeing that person. I'm not going to feel sorry for you, or stop going to that place. And so in those instances, we refuse compassion because we don't want to give up any more energy to that person or to that situation. It's not to say that you're right or wrong, but it is to be important for us to recognize why we're choosing to have compassion or not, even if it's consciously or subconsciously. There is a choice. There is a weight to carry to have compassion. So oftentimes we look at our own selves and we say, well, we're not even so sometimes compassionate for ourselves. And that goes for different reasons as well. Sometimes it's easier, believe it or not, for us to not have compassion for ourselves. It doesn't make it right. Obviously, we should have compassion for ourselves if no one else does. But sometimes we don't. Sometimes we look at mistakes that we make and we say, you know what? I should have known better. I don't deserve compassion in that situation. Whereas really, you do. You may have deserved compassion because everybody makes mistakes, but it's much easier to say that you don't deserve compassion when it's something you believe you could have done differently. So let's talk about why compassion is important anyways. We talked about, why we wouldn't have compassion, why we would choose to not, but why is it important to have? Well, it's important to have because, like I said, it's energy. It's energy in different ways. So when we are givers of compassion, it's an energy of a weight that we're carrying. It doesn't mean that we should be it. We are. When we are receiving, it's an energy that we're receiving. And it's a gift. It's a gift from others. Or it's a gift we give ourselves. So when we give ourselves compassion, it's like saying, you know what? You get another chance. You get another chance to do it right. You may not get another chance to do it right, but you get another chance to do. And sometimes we need to say that to ourselves. We're going to care for ourselves in our situations of vulnerability. And we obviously need to say that to others sometimes in their situations of vulnerability, whether they cause it or not. Sometimes it's important for us to say, I care about you. I'm here for you. And that is enough. That is not saying that you're condoning their behavior or what they said or the situation, but to say, I care about you. I'm here for you. That is showing compassion to give that person energy to get back up. It's not telling them that you are condoning what they're doing or you're expecting them even to do the right thing the next time. But what it is saying is that you still care about them as an individual. And so compassion is something that is very, I would say, close to unconditional love. Obviously, we can be compassionate, but it's not always unconditional. But I will say compassion shows us the path to loving people unconditionally, because we know it's easy to love people and accept people when they're doing the right thing, especially the right thing by ourselves. But it's much more difficult to not only have that love, but show and express that love when we feel like the person is out of order, whether it's spiritually or behaviorally or otherwise. So, the message today really is understanding the difference between what that easy compassion is and what is the tested compassion. What is that compassion that may be more important than the easy compassion, but yet far more difficult? Hope you have a good night.